Good morning. Thank you for joining us this morning for the first of what we hope will be many Partners in Project Green Fireside chats. These are important conversations, an important part of helping to drive environmental action and economic prosperity in the Greater Toronto Area. My name is Todd Ernst, and I am the Director of Aviation Infrastructure, Energy and Environment at the Greater Toronto Airports Authority. I'm also the co-chair of Partners of Project Green, and for today I will also be your MC. Thank you to everybody who has submitted questions. There is the ability to continue submitting questions during the event via the questions tab. We'll do our best to get to as many of these as possible during the questions and answer period. Also, this session is being recorded, so you have the ability to go back and review the session and share it with your colleagues. And to start with, I am pleased to introduce Councillor Jennifer Innes, Town of Caledon Regional Councillor, representing wards 3 and 4. And she's also the chair for the board of the Toronto Region and Conservation Authority, and she'll provide us with opening remarks. Councillor Innes, thank you.
Good morning and happy Wednesday, everyone. Thank you, Todd, for the introduction. And thank you all for joining us this morning for the inaugural Legislator Fireside Chat Series event focused on the Government of Canada's support for businesses as part of a green COVID recovery. We recognize that large-scale, multifaceted challenges, including COVID recovery and climate action, will require intervention from all levels of government, businesses, the broader public service, and residents together. Thank you for joining in that conversation today. As chair of the Toronto Region Conservation Authority and a regional councillor for Peel, I'd like to start by thanking MP Sorbara and Mr. Ernst, as well as the business leaders and the community members who have taken the time to join us this morning. I'd also like to thank Toronto Pearson for their excellent leadership in the community and support of Partners in Project Green. Finally, I would like to recognize the support of our municipal partners, including Peel Region and its municipalities of Brampton, Mississauga, and Caledon, the City of Toronto and York Region, and the City of Vaughan for their support of this initiative. I would particularly like to thank the partners and members of PPG for their recent support of our efforts related to the Conservation Authorities Act amendments. On particularly good outcome was the government accepting our advice to continue to allow us to offer programs such as Partners in Project Green. While other amendments were challenging, the TRCA was pleased that we will continue to offer this valuable service to our communities, and we appreciate your support through these efforts. I'd like to provide some background on the evolution of Partners in Project Green into Canada's largest eco-business zone. Partners in Project Green, a Pearson eco-business zone, was launched in 2008 by Toronto and Region Conservation Authority and the Greater Toronto Airports Authority, while support from municipalities including Peel, York, and the City of Toronto, and lower-tier municipalities including Mississauga and Brampton, and from the nearby business community to transform the employment land surrounding Toronto Pearson and located within the TRCA's Etobicoke-Mimico Creeks watershed into an internationally recognized community of eco-friendly businesses. PPG's mandate has expanded since its launch to include the provisions of numerous services to partnership members. The primary performance areas of the partnerships are communications and engagement, waste management, energy performance and low carbon transportation, and water stewardship. Within each of these performance areas, PPG provides the following services to members: providing expert advice and sustainability opportunities identification, facilitating collective action initiatives, performance tracking, sharing best practices and facilitating peer-to-peer learning, providing networking opportunities, accelerating innovation through network introductions, events, and partnerships, providing members with speaking opportunities, profile and recognition through case studies, trade publication articles, and the PPG website and social media posts. The size, scale, and geographical scope of the partnership has also grown to include additional municipalities, such as the City of Vaughan and one that I'm partial to, the Town of Caledon. A non-profit organizations and businesses. Currently, the PPG network includes 73 members, including 7 municipalities, 9 not-for-profits, and 57 businesses. Every business in our watershed has felt the impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic. In a time of rapid change and uncertainty, part of our role as a conservation authority is to act as a convener and a facilitator, connecting business owners and community members with legislators as we chart a course for sustainable economic recovery. To pursue this, PPG has launched the Legislator Fireside Chat Series as a forum for dialogue and collaboration between government and business. It is important that we provide the business community with timely and useful information to help our stakeholders as they pivot and adapt. We will also support legislators as they advance the government's vision for the forthcoming economic recovery. Through the PPPG Fireside Chat program and PPG programs, TRCA will continue to engage and involve the business and residential communities as partners in conserving our natural resources, finding a win-win situation while also supporting a strong economy. For example, the TRCA's Sustainable Neighborhood Action Plan, known as SNAP, was recently recognized with a Federation of Canadian Municipalities Visionary Award, which is granted to projects from across Canada for over the past 20 years to have generated long-term community change. SNAP is a neighborhood program for sustainable urban renewal and climate action, which is helping make neighborhoods more resilient. In addition, the TRCA Meadoway is transforming a hydro corridor in Scarborough into a vibrant 16-kilometer stretch of urban green space and meadowlands that will become one of Canada's largest linear urban parks. The Meadoway will connect 7 rivers and ravine systems, 15 parks, 16 kilometers of trail, 13 neighborhoods, over 200 hectares of meadow, and more than 1,000 diverse species of flora and fauna. This innovative city building initiative will also connect schools, businesses, hospitals, and trails, and community-powered green spaces. The Meadoway project won the Canadian Urban Institute's 2020 Reach Out Brownie Award, recognizing the project's innovative approach to remaking underutilized spaces into projects that contribute to healthy communities. We would encourage partners in Project Green to get involved through the corporate sponsorship and help us implement the Meadoway and other great projects that are the focus of the Toronto and Region Conservation Authority. As a member of the Toronto Region Conservation Foundation, I also sit on the foundation board as well as the TRCA Board of Directors, and we work towards things like the Bolton Camp, Black Creek Pioneer Village, and Tommy Thompson Park. If you're interested, please speak to Jeff Robertson and Daryl Gray on how your company or organization can get involved with these fabulous projects. Conservation and strong economy go hand in hand. And I'm excited to see the principles of eco-business zone development and business sustainability programs expand to employment areas across our jurisdiction and to see closer alignment with our partners' strategic goals and objectives. Partners in Project Green supports businesses by helping to embed sustainability in decision-making and in the planning, development, and operations of facilities. This is accomplished through the sharing of best practices and reduces emissions, conserves water, and engagement stakeholders directly on sustainable development. At this point, I'd like to turn it back over to Todd for our Fireside Chat interview with MP Sorbara. And again, thank you all for attending, and I hope you have a fabulous event.
Thank you, Councillor Innes. It was a great overview of the breadth of all the great things that the TRCA is doing in the communities. So I'd like to start with introducing Mr. Francesco Sorbara. He was first elected as a member of Parliament for Vaughan Woodbridge in 2015. Mr. Sorbara is passionate about the Vaughan community, where he resides with his family, and with his strong work ethic and desire for a better future, values instilled in him by his immigrant parents, Mr. Sorbara is committed to supporting all of the residents in his community. As chair of the Canada-Italy Interparliamentary Group, he brings together Canadians and Italian leaders to promote business and cultural ties between the two countries. And Mr. Sorbara has served in the 42nd session of Parliament as a member of the House of Commons Standing Committee on Finance. Mr. Sorbara is a chartered financial analyst and worked in the global finance markets for nearly 20 years in both Canada and the United States for Scotiabank, JP Morgan Chase, and the global credit rating agency DBRS. Welcome, Mr. Sorbara.
Thank you, Todd. Thank you, Todd. If I can add just one more thing to that, I did have the honor and privilege of being appointed the Parliamentary Secretary to the National Revenue Minister in the 43rd session of Parliament. So I do have that role as well, and along with some other things that have been added to my list. It's great to be here this morning. I want to say good morning to everyone watching today. Thank you to partners in Project Green for organizing this event, to TRCA, to Councillor Innes. Thank you so much. It's great to be here. I think we have a lot to talk about today.
We do. How are you and your family doing in these certainly unprecedented times now?
Well, as a father of two young, very outgoing young daughters, we're great to have them back at school. I think that's the first thing that we'll have to admit. We're very glad they have that structure back in their lives. I think for everyone in Canada and throughout the world, the last number of months have been jaw-wrenching, upending, whatever term you want to use. It's been a real learning experience that I think we'll all look back at hopefully in a few months and say we're glad it's over, but we learned a few things, and it changed many things in our lifestyles. But for the family, we're good. We're well, thank you. Thank you for asking. I hope you and your family are well, and everyone else out there watching. But it's definitely been a learning experience for everyone.
Oh, thank you. I've got two daughters as well, and my in-laws also live with us in the same household. So it was very crowded through the spring when the schools were closed. I echo your sentiment on kids being back in school. It struck me as well. In your role in particular, personal interaction is just so critical. How have you adapted to that?
That is a very interesting question. I think what this has allowed, this pandemic has allowed us, is through Zoom and through new technologies that we really didn't use prior to the pandemic. It's allowed us to become a lot more efficient, a lot more productive in a lot of respects. For example, last week I was on the phone with some of your counterparts at GTAA. And it was, usually you would call and say, oh, I'd like to come up and set up a meeting, and drive out there for 30, 40 minutes, park, go inside for an hour, come back and drive. And, your whole morning would be taken up. But literally we can now do that with a Zoom meeting and spend a half an hour connecting, have the meeting and be done with it, and then go on with our day. So on the level in terms of meeting with stakeholders, we've definitely adapted and learned. Obviously, I miss the face-to-face interaction, visiting my seniors groups and all the organization, attending, certain galas and events that happened, celebrations. We all miss those to a certain extent, absolutely. And I'm sure that those will return in due time. But I think it's allowed us to adapt very nicely. And these new technologies, much like what's going on with sustainability in the environment, is allowing us to become more productive and really pivot. I think it's an exciting time.
Oh, indeed. Yeah, it's amazing how much change has happened in such a short period and how we've all adapted to it. Can you talk to us a little bit about what the government is doing in the near term to help businesses to get through the impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic and to continue adapting?
Yes, thank you for that question, Todd. And as an economist by training, as someone who worked in the financial markets for about 20 years before I entered the public space, this shock to our system, to the economy, wasn't your normal recession. It was a public health emergency. It wasn't a market failure, as we would comment. And because it was so jarring, so sudden, and just so pronounced, the government had to step in a very, very big manner. And you've seen that across the world. Here in Canada, we develop policies as a government and as a part of the governing party, literally that you would think that would be developed in a matter of years or months. That would take. They literally were introduced in a matter of weeks. So for employees and for workers that were laid off, we had to put in place the Canada Emergency so the CERB, I'm forgetting the acronym, response benefit, and then now we have the Canada Recovery Benefit. We adjusted the EI conditions and qualifications because a lot of workers weren't going to be getting their seasonal hours, say in Atlantic Canada. We adjusted those. And then for employers, the Canada Emergency Wage Subsidy, at one time that was supporting 3.5 million workers or over across this country. and that was implemented, and we've and now we've adjusted the rental benefit, because we know York Region and Peel Region, all the areas that all the conservation authorities cover, and the partners of Project Green, all their partners, we brought in a benefit that pays directly to landlords. So if you look at all our programs we've introduced, the business account, the queues to support workers, the recovery benefits, the 3 that we have introduced, we've taken a very, very, very holistic approach in saying we do not want scarring. And what I mean by that, we do not want permanent effects on our economy for individuals. We want to come out of this. The only way we're going to come out of this is stronger. And I would add, if you look back at the 08-09 financial crisis, a lot of advice was to pull back on what we would call fiscal stimulus, and we knew what happened was that governments pulled back too early, and growth rates afterwards, it took too long of a time to recover. Where we're not going to do that. We're going to maintain the stimulus. We're going to help Canadians reinforce that bridge. And as the Prime Minister says, we're in winter, but spring is coming. And I think that's a very valid statement. We've put in place all these programs. They've been extended. They're going to be carrying out through the spring and some till June. And we're here to help Canadians.
Very good. So of course, it's a PPG event, so we're going to talk about some of the green aspects of recovery as well. And you can certainly argue that we've got 2 almost in some ways maybe competing or conflicting crises with the near-term impacts of the COVID-19 and the both near and maybe longer-term impacts of climate change. And of course, the federal government has recognized both. There's the declared climate emergency in 2019. On the economic side, with COVID and everything that's happening now, a reduction in employment, about 100,000 active Canadian businesses reduced since February of 2020. Do you think it's possible to design and implement a climate resilient economic recovery? Can we reconcile what seems to be 2 conflicting priorities?
Well, I would vehemently argue that there are in no way conflicting priorities at all, and I would actually argue vehemently that the market, the private sector, is already leading the way. We as a federal government came out last week with, and I'm just holding it here, a healthy environment and a healthy economy document. And I encourage all stakeholders, I encourage all Canadians to take a look at this document, because it's a very robust, substantive document in terms of fighting climate change, the transition that is already happening, and where Canada will be going over the next several decades to meet the net zero goal by 2050. And I said this in the House of Commons a few weeks ago. If you look at where industries are, if you look at where, for example, utilities are, and as the president of France, Macron, said several months ago, there is no plan B for the planet. We only have one planet, right? It's only plan A. There's only got to be one plan A, and the same with the conservation authorities. We only have watersheds. We just don't make watersheds up every couple of years. There's a new watershed that happened. We need to protect the watersheds. We need to protect our environment, because there is no substitute. And that's, in my mind, the way I look at it. So there was an interesting chart that was brought up that showed the market capitalization of companies, of energy companies. And it was a 6 or 7 year interval. And, you had the big oil companies, Chevron, Exxon, and you had some of the renewable companies. Well, if you looked over time, the market capitalizations, what we call the traditional oil participants, have gone down and shrunk. And then you have these other entities led by Enel Group. There's 3 European companies, NextEra, that are just ballooning. And if you look at the market cap of, say, Tesla, if you look at what's going on with sustainable finance, that is where the money is going. That is where the institutional, as we call, money is going. So the idea that there's some sort of Venn diagram and 2 circles, that don't overlap between the economy and environment, it's a false argument. It's a false argument. And I think even when we launched the document, even the Canadian Association of Petroleum Producers, the Chemical Industry Association of Canada, actually came out and said, you know what, this is a great document. I'm not exact words, but we're largely supportive of where the government's going. And you know what? And that's what's going to take. It's going to take a holistic approach. We're guiding it. I'd love to talk about some of the measures that are going to pertain to conservation authorities, to municipalities within the document. But the world's already going there, and technology is already going there. Whether it's hydrogen, whether it's the price of solar, whether it's the price of batteries for electric vehicles. So we're going there. So governments and certain entities may want to think, well, maybe we should. No, the private sector, and I'm a big private sector proponent, they're already there. They're going there. That's the conversation happening today. And we as stakeholders and as policymakers need to recognize that.
Yeah, no, I tend to agree. You know, my role includes energy and environment, and we certainly see that at the airport. And you know, a significant portion of being greener is about being more efficient and you know, using less energy, which saves costs as well, and you know, certainly beneficial in that regard. So you talked about the Pan-Canadian framework and all the things that, you know, the government is coming forward with. When do you expect businesses will have a line of sight to more detail on, you know, how they can participate, what projects would be eligible for this?
Absolutely. The first thing I would say is to everyone out there, you know, please go and download the document, A Healthy Environment and a Healthy Economy. Not because it's just your only reading that it should be, but for any business out there to understand where we are going with economic policy and with the recovery, because this is what we're really talking about is as we build back and as the recovery takes place, where are we going to be investing, whether it's in public transit, whether it's in retrofitting homes, whether it's in planting trees, whether it's further investments in what's called like the Atlantic Loop. There are 64 different measures that are announced in this document with investments totaling $15 billion that are going to be unveiled and details coming out. I know for our municipalities, and I just want to pull it up here, in budget 2019, we came out with several programs that were, you know, the disaster mitigation fund, and we're going to come out, I just want to make sure I pull it up here in front of me. We're going to come out with a third stream on it that municipalities can go into. Like there's $1.5 billion for municipalities to look at in terms of, you know, improving the energy efficiency of schools, improving community centers, those older type buildings that we want to improve. So for businesses out there, there's going to be a line of sight on a very, very detailed 64 different policies here, 64 different measures introduced here in the document. And it's something that we know we must do. These are the investments that we need to make. The world is making them. We know down in the U.S. with the new U.S. administration, there is a team being assembled there, and I've seen the last participants on the team that's going to be very focused on this transition and on these investments, whether it's the electrical grid, zero emission vehicles, public transportation, revising the housing standards, energy efficiency. So a lot of stuff there, Todd.
Thank you. Are there any? Is there any advice that you could offer to the businesses that are here today? What can they do to get in front of this, to position their businesses for the coming clean economy and the programs that are coming down the pipe?
Okay, you know that is the first thing I would recommend, and is that there is a Canadian Centre for Climate Services climate data portal, which provides, you know, engineers, public health professionals, urban planners, and other users with the right data to plan and adapt to climate change. So there is that portal there that businesses can go to. Obviously, we're continuing to make investments. We have what's called the Canadian Agricultural Strategic Priorities Program. There'll be a significant investment done there for our farmers, for our agricultural community. For businesses, obviously, go to the NRCan website, go to the Environment Canada website. There is just, I want to say, a ton of information, but there's going to be a lot of avenues to participate. You know, the Canada's first ever national adaptation strategy will be coming out. We have a clean growth hub, which I want to highlight for the listeners out there. And I know I'm putting out there a lot of information because A, there is a lot of information, and B, this process is going on as we speak. Businesses are out there, whether they're moving some of their operations online and digitally to make them more efficient, or whether they're investing in their actual businesses to lower their greenhouse gas emissions and make themselves more efficient. The Clean Growth Hub, which is a whole of government focal point for clean technology focused on supporting companies, projects, and coordinating project programs and tracking results. There's also a number of opportunities on what's called energy efficient buildings research and sustainable development. It's the SD Tech Fund, and I'm more than happy to provide this information to you afterwards in a written document. So it's very there's just a lot of information that can be ascertained, obviously online. The Clean Growth Hub, just to re-mention that, where businesses can look to and receive direction. Obviously, there's some taxation measures, 100% write-off for zero emission vehicles for those used in business. One of the measures that we've introduced for sure.
Well, yeah, no, that is a lot of information for sure. Just to shift gears just a little bit to the the domestic economy impacts of the pandemic. There was a call for Canadian manufacturers to create PPE, and they met the challenge quite successfully. At the same time, there were some other supply chain challenges. For instance, milk and some other food producers had to discard product that they couldn't distribute. Can you talk to us a little bit about some of the lessons learned, from all of this, and how can we better future-proof? Hopefully, there's not next time around, but future-proof the economy.
Again, a very, very, very pertinent, very important question, because it's been touched upon by all our leaders, from the Premier of Ontario to the Prime Minister to business leaders. And yes, even within my riding that I represent, we had everybody from the Woodbridge Phone Group, which is an auto parts manufacturer personal protection equipment. We had a number of distilleries, Magnotta, Last Straw Distillery, move and actually start making hand sanitizer. We had other groups making gowns. They were making furniture, and obviously their businesses came to a halt. They pivoted and transitioned. And what I would say to that is, you've seen, so for example, the levels of cooperation with government, which has been fantastic throughout the pandemic. There was an investment in a 3M manufacturing facility, I believe, out in Eastern Ontario, where different levels of government came together, made the investment with the private company to ensure that PPE is made here in Canada, to ensure that we have that supply chain. And I think you will see that. I think, I don't think anybody got complacent in terms of the supply chains, because supply chains are very, very robust, just-in-time manufacturing, just-in-time in terms of parts and for various industries. But I think what this pandemic exposed is once those supply chains get a little frayed and a little bit of nationalism comes in, where we need to keep the products here for ourselves to protect our own citizens, then certain areas were left bare, and we needed to react to that, and we did. And whether it's ventilator production, which I think now we've produced over 8,000 ventilators here in Canada, led by a number of private entities that came together, whether it's masks, just a lot of supply chains came together very quickly. And that's the power of the private market and industry working together collaboratively with government's help.
So, do you think this is a one-off, or do you think this is going to spark a bit of a trend in terms of more local production and more close-to-home supply chains?
That our integration for example, with the United States is always going to be very, very strong. We're always going to have a very integrated market and integrated relationship. So, for example, aluminum and steel that we manufacture is sent down to the States. They refine some of it, send it back here. Our auto industry is always going to be very, very integrated. And we've seen, you asked me earlier on about the business investments that are going on. Well, you've seen some of those business investments with the announcement by Ford Motor Company and building the electric vehicles in Oakville. You've seen it down in Windsor with FCA producing their vehicles and electric vehicles. And you're always going to have that level of integration. I think with our largest and most important trading partner, I think those areas where we need are deemed essential. So face mask production, N95 masks, so the equivalents. Certain medicines, making sure we have a domestic production source because they're deemed to be essential. I think that will change. I think that's one thing that has definitely been highlighted, and you've seen a number of investments from our government pointing that way, so that we have that domestic manufacturing capability, and because we have the know-how, we have the human capital. There's no question about it. It's just a matter of ensuring that we have that domestic source.
You mentioned electric vehicles, and it's kind of taking my mind, off script a little bit, but thinking about the transport sector, which figures fairly prominently in terms of GHG impact and the government's plans. What are some of the key pillars that you see in the transport sector for generating a greener economy going forward?
Todd, the investments we're going to be making, obviously, to expand the number of charging stations. I think if I'm looking at my numbers here, I think we're up to almost 500 charging stations across Canada, if not more. We announced in the document a number. I just want to make sure I have the exact number. Well, first of all, 100% tax write-off for commercial light duty and medium heavy duty electric vehicles. And what I would say to the participants this morning is, if you look at companies around the world, whether it's Volkswagen or Mercedes, on the truck side, Scania, they are investing billions, literally tens of billions of dollars of electrifying their product cadence. So the products that are going to be coming out of those automakers. And that's going to happen on the heavy duty truck side. And it's already happening. So we're going to see that. So again, industry is already leading to that way. Europe is, they're all on board in terms of hitting the net zero. Even, I wouldn't say even, but the UK under the Conservative Prime Minister Boris Johnson is one of the biggest proponents of zero emission vehicles and one of the biggest proponents in fighting climate change. So it's already happening here. For us, we had an announcement in the document. I just want to make sure I pull it up and give you the right number. And yeah, 433 charging stations built, and another 800 are currently under construction in Canada, and $150 million will be committed over the next 3 years to expand and continue to expand the number of charging stations, and also provide the $5,000 rebate when people go and purchase their vehicles. I think you're going to see, not only when we think of transportation, but every day there are boats, and call them boats, but freight that goes across the country from one country to another, whether shipping grain or wheat and so forth. And those containers, those are powered by diesel. Those vessels are powered by diesel. We are going to get to a point to those vessels being powered by electricity and a different source of energy being put there. And there's a cost curve. Battery packs are coming down. So the way zero emission vehicles are taking off steadily and incrementally, but going in some countries very, very strongly, Denmark, Sweden, just to name a few. So that sector there, that transportation sector, we announced a big investment for public transit. It's going to be, there's literally, I think the number was $1.5 billion to accelerate the adoption of zero emission buses. Again, 1.5 billion zero emission buses. Where are those buses made? A company in Quebec and New Flyer in Manitoba, with parts coming from across Canada. So literally all those buses that are across Canada being used right now that are powered by diesel or a non-renewable energy source, will be replaced in the coming years. Again, another business opportunity, but another opportunity to reduce GHGs.
Excellent. So we talked a lot about GHG, climate mitigation. The flip side of that is how do we adapt to changes that we're seeing in the weather and the climate. Can you talk a little bit about how businesses can better future-proof against extreme weather of different sorts, such as more high-intense rain, temperature effects, whatnot?
Yeah, well, that was a program that we actually brought in a couple of years called the Disaster Mitigation Fund, and that provided literally, it was a several billion-dollar program where we provided funds to municipalities to what you would call proof themselves from the effects of climate change. And I think that is a path that we're continuing to make. There are a number of streams that are going to be coming that are in the document that define that number of programs, 1.5 billion for municipalities and the like, and supporting our local and small businesses as they adopt. I'm just looking at some of the measures here. We're going to cut, I think it's the corporate tax rate in half for companies making zero emission products. So just encouraging that transition there. And what I would say is within, for example, with the conservation authorities, one of the things that we announced, which I think is very pertinent for the TRCA and the area around the airport, is the investment of $631 million over 10 years in Canada's grasslands, wetlands, peatlands, and anything, and restoring degraded ecosystems, protecting wildlife, and improving land and resource management practices. And I apologize for reading that verbatim, but it's so important that it needs to be read verbatim because protecting our watersheds, our wetlands, areas very sensitive around cities and whether it's downtown Toronto or in the suburbs is so important. The announcement to plant 2 billion trees, and we know how important trees are in terms of retaining water, in terms of protecting watersheds, protecting the natural environment. That is another way of what you would in your question saying, well, how do we protect against climate change events? Well, it's restoring the natural habitat to where it is and protecting the habitat and reinforcing it. That will help us get there.
Yeah, and trees are it's one way to sequester carbon, of course. And there was a question that was submitted earlier about carbon capture and how that fits in to your plans.
Oh, that is actually interesting. That's an interesting question. There was a report issued about 3 or 4 weeks ago from the Royal Bank of Canada and talking about carbon sequestration. I think from everything I've read and everything I've gathered, part and parcel, a large component of reducing GHGs is through carbon sequestration. My understanding is that, the technologies, there's need to be some upfront investment that government may have to make in partnership. There's been a lot of work done on that front. But it's an exciting opportunity. It's an exciting opportunity for our traditional oil and gas sector, and we know we're going to need those sectors for several decades. Those sectors are not going away. I often tell people, well, if you look at Norway, they actually just issued a number of licenses to drill oil in the North Sea until 2050, and it's a fact because there's still going to be a demand for oil products and gas. And we understand that. At the same time, how can we, encourage and because there's literally the energy sector employs 800,000 Canadians in this beautiful country, and how can we allow them to adapt and keep that future going because there's a demand for that product, and carbon sequestration is something that it's going to be part and parcel of the program. Absolutely.
Yeah, and this is all going to take a lot of innovation as well as existing technologies. And you talked about the growth hub and all the great mechanisms that are out there now to help to promote innovation. Also want to call attention in case some of the viewers haven't noticed in the chat, some of the members have been posting links to more detail about what's been talked about here. So there is a link to the Disaster Mitigation and Adaptation Fund, Clean Growth Hub, and the Healthy Environment, Healthy Economy document. So that is up there, and I'm sure more will pop up as we go. And again, don't hesitate to submit your questions as we go as well. So I've got a few other questions that were submitted earlier, and they really, to me, they kind of fall into two broad buckets. One is very focused more on local community and the home, and then there are the more business focused ones. So I thought I'd just start with the community home-based ones, and one of the first questions in that category was, how will governments ensure support translates into community value as opposed to stockholder value?
Oh, that's you know what, that is a very I would say a very good question in the sense that helping the environment, or putting in place measures to ensure a healthy environment and healthy economy have to be based on a set of measures that we are helping individual Canadians, and that we're ensuring that the transition allows Canadians to make the choices, incentivizes them to make choices that's good for themselves and their family and the economy. And I think in striking that right balance is something very important. So for example, in the Healthy Environment, Healthy Economy document, and as we've laid out, we are going to raise the price on pollution, and a number, as an economist and as a small c fiscal individual, that is for me the right way to go. You increase the price on something that's a negative externality, as we would call it, and you rebate that money back to Canadians to ensure they're not worse off, and it incentivizes a change in behavior. And I think that is something that is something so important. Looking through this document, and even our document in 2016, investing in the things that Canadians want, putting in public transit. I know a big thing that was highlighted by a number of municipalities, from the mayor of Toronto to the mayor of Vaughan, was the Prime Minister's comments on putting in place a permanent public transit fund. And we know in normal times, public transit is something that millions of Canadians, especially those living in urban areas, and we know we have a subway here a couple kilometers from 2 or 3 kilometers from my office here, that the residents of the city of Vaughan take to go downtown. We and I love to share this. We in Ontario Caucus, the Ontario Liberal MPs, we have argued vehemently that the permanent public transit funding should be brought forward a number of years, should be expanded by a significant amount, because we know in order to build those subway lines, in order to help Canadians get to work quicker, take cars off the road, which fits, I think, within the values that we have. For example, the Yonge North subway line, there's 2,000 diesel buses that go up and down every day. We know that's a priority for our government to lower greenhouse gas emissions, make those investments, look at public transit projects which make sense, have a future, are going to create a great community, whether it exists or not. So that's going to be very, very important with regards to the community. And these investments that we've laid out are just, I think, just hit that sweet spot in striking that right balance in terms of what do communities want. Well, we want a healthy environment. We don't, like, there is no plan B, Todd. I have no other way of saying that. There's no plan B. And even all the parties across the spectrum have said they've agreed net zero by 2050. And you can even harken back to Teddy Roosevelt and the creation of the national park system in the United States, or Brian Mulroney and closing the ozone layer. Like, there is no plan B. Banning single-use plastics where it makes sense. We can't have our oceans littered with plastic and not have things recycled. And I think you've seen the provincial government here in Ontario take the lead in terms of reconfiguring how the recycling takes place. And I applaud that. And that's what we need to do. Those are shared values of doing what's right for the environment and doing what's right for the family at home.
Oh, agreed. Yeah, at the airport, we've also recently committed to net zero GHG by 2050 for our airport facilities. It's the science now, and frankly, good business to pursue this. So another question that has just come up, and I think it's one that a lot of folks might have on their minds. Why did the federal government pursue a carbon tax instead of simply incentivizing green technology? Are you concerned about the impacts of a carbon tax on small business and low-income families, particularly during the pandemic? Is this a potentially more punitive option?
No, that is a great question, and in the document, we've even identified, there's page 30 about maintaining competitiveness and managing against what's called carbon leakage. The first thing is we don't want to put one industry at an unequal footing versus, say, another industry in another country. And I use the example as when I think about this in my small mind, I think, well, if I'm going to build a plant here in Canada and it's super efficient, still emits greenhouse gas emissions, or the plant is, over in another country where they're not using that right technology, they're not using the best and most cleanest technology, their product is not as clean as ours, and those are things we think about, and that's addressed within the document. So putting in place cutting the corporate tax rate for investments in investments in clean technology, incentivizing businesses to do that. We brought in accelerated capital cost depreciation, or for a number of years, to incentivize firms so they can take the write down right away for cash flow. So we've done that on the price of carbon. There are different models, like there is the cap and trade system, but the cleanest one in terms of being able to rebate it back. And actually, we make under the system, low-income families are actually made better off under the system. If you look at the reports that are out there, low-income families benefit the best. In terms of the market, the least amount, and I can use the word distortion, but the best outcome is through putting a price on a product and making it as transparent as possible. For small businesses, obviously, we have a number of programs out there, and there's one of the measures here for small businesses for them to apply to certain programs, to them to reduce their GHGs, and government will provide a certain amount of subsidy. I think it's up to 25%, if I'm not mistaken. So a number of programs have been developed there. These measures that we've introduced, especially on the price of carbon, is so important to meeting that goal in 2030. That's our first measurement date, and the price of carbon allows that. It allows the market, and you're pricing an externality or pricing pollution, and you're putting a price on that, and that's really the most efficient way to reduce GHGs. From everything I've read as an economist, and I'm people that know me here in Vaughan and stakeholders that I've worked with know I'm pretty frank about my comments, and I'm a big private business person. I want people out there creating jobs, making money, and growing wealth, obviously in an inclusive manner, of course. And putting a price on carbon, to me, is the best way to get there.
Indeed. The next question that I've got here is in relation to how we would address, or how the plan addresses, small businesses in rural Canada, incorporating sustainability and contributing to the national climate goals. So, how can small businesses participate?
Excellent question. First of all, on the rural component, because the challenges and opportunities in rural Canada are much differences than the challenges and opportunities here in urban Canada. For example, sometimes some rural municipalities don't have any buses. There's no public transit system. They're just that small. There's just not the opportunities to participate in, say, certain programs that are available here in urban areas. And I do know we've made within one of the 64 measures that we've made, there is, I believe, a $300 million commitment to help rural Canada and rural businesses, not the agricultural side. These are businesses. So it is something we're very, very, very cognizant of. And I was just trying to find it here within my notes. But it is something that we are looking at, and in terms of we are helping out with. And there's also the bigger picture. So, for example, in Atlantic Canada, we know Atlantic Canada has a lot of clean energy. Hydroelectricity, the dam being built, and I think it's actually completed in Newfoundland. and there's something called the Atlantic Loop. Well, the Atlantic Loop is going to require a $2.5 billion investment from our side, and we've committed to bring that clean electricity to the Atlantic provinces. And a lot of the Atlantic provinces have very small towns. So that would benefit a lot of those small businesses by us making a very large investment. You know, we're going to contribute 2.6 billion for retrofits for homes, and that's something we're going to do, and that's going to be something that, you know, rural Canada can participate as much as urban Canada can. So a lot of these programs are going to be able to benefit both urban and rural Canada, and especially those small businesses, of course.
Yeah. Yeah, like you said, you know, we don't have a plan B, and you know, time is short too. 2050 or 2030 is even closer, obviously. You know, just 10 years, and to the net zero goal, we do need aggressive action to get there, and it's great to hear that so many things are happening now. Just to shift away from climate change, just you know, a little bit though. One of the another question that we've got related to clothing recycling, very specific. Somebody made a comment that government should incentivize us to return used clothes. Are there any government programs?
That actually, I had that is a very interesting question, because my team and I worked on it for the last couple of days, and I don't think there is a specific program in terms of just recycling clothes. I think I would tie that into is, you know, when we look at plastics and we look at the components up, because plastic's a very big word, but underneath plastics, there's a lot of good plastics, and there's a lot of material that goes into plastics that actually by itself are not very good for Canadians. So what I would say on that is ensuring that where the clothing is sourced from, so we're ensuring that the labor that's being used is being fairly compensated, and there's no child labor used to make the clothing. And thirdly, when the clothing is purchased, that there are opportunities for Canadians to then bring it to a Goodwill or you know, somewhere to drop that clothing off, that it can be turned over, whether it's still usable for someone else, or whether it can be sent, rather than just being sent to a garbage dump, if I can use that term, because we want to. I know one of the components for Project Green is diverting waste and saving water, if I can use the word saving water, and diverting waste from landfills, and you've been very successful at that, and that would fit into that realm. But there is no exact program for that from the federal government.
Okay. Yeah, well, I'll take the chance to you know, comment on the, you know, PPG does in fact have a textile program, recycling collection drive, and they partner with Diabetes Canada on textile recycling. We actually have a few of their bins at the airport as well for employees, and it's a pretty well received program. So there are opportunities out there to take advantage of.
No,
Okay.
Todd, if I can just follow up, you know, we're having this conversation today, and I think for all the stakeholders out there, whether it's small business, big business, whether it's the airport, whether it's the municipalities, you know, we are coming out of what I always coin this term, and my staff tends to laugh, a very unique and extraordinary period of time in the world's history. I think as a legislator, look at, you know, going out a year or two, and then thinking about when I look back, I will say, wow, what did we just go through? Whether, you know, and I think that's going to be for everyone, people who are on the front lines, and healthcare workers, people working at major international airports, the disruption this has caused, the changes this has caused to lifestyles, but also, you know, the opportunities that are going to be presented to the world in terms of the recovery out there. And we've seen it, I'm going to emphasize this, whether it's Europe and whether it's going to be the United States or Canada, a green recovery is going to be the focal point. In Europe, the recovery fund there, the $750 billion in euros, which is that's going to be divided up, is largely focused on green and digital. And you know, the digital realm fits into what we're doing today. we're digital, we're live, we're on webinar, and there's so many different platforms. And I think here in Canada, I encourage all the stakeholders, and you know, I work as close as I can with the municipality here in the city of Vaughan, with my large employers, that, you know, this document with these measures, because there's some tax measures in there in terms of investments in clean technology. There's going to be measures for retrofitting big buildings, whether they're government owned or not, excuse me, and the impact on the average person in terms of increasing that price on pollution and then rebating it back to them. And the choices we'll make down the years. The cost of the tech innovation, and Todd, you've said this, Menta, the innovation that's going on right now, we don't even know about, but we do know that it's happening and that's impacting the cost of things. So bringing down the cost curve on battery packs for electric vehicles, which would be probably the most tangible thing out there for someone to see and say, oh, what are we doing to fight climate change? Well, look at the electric vehicle on the road, and Volkswagen's going to have a fully electric fleet in, say, 5 years or 3 years, and Ford's going to be producing electrical vehicles at their Oakville plant in 2023. Those are the tangible things. So I encourage all stakeholders, like, this is where the world is going, and it's not going to be stopping for anyone, and anyone who thinks it's not going to be going that way.
Yeah, well, one of the best pieces of advice I think I ever got was don't waste a good crisis. You know, there are challenges, but there are also opportunities that may never pop up again too, right? So definitely want to identify those and seize on them. I think this is it for green recovery.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely.
Okay, so we had another question coming back to carbon sequestration again. This time more focused on large scale carbon sequestration. You know, how can Canadian organizations get support for projects such as urban and rural reforestation projects? I think we touched on that a little bit, but if you could maybe elaborate just a little bit.
Well, we did on the reforestation, and I'm a kid, and I say, you know, I'm a kid that grew up in northern BC, so I know quite well the first generation, you know, second generation, third generation planting of trees and reforestation that happens after logging comes in. You know, we what I would say is, you know, we did make the announcement of that we are going to plant 2 billion trees over 10 years for an investment of $3.2 billion. I would definitely recommend going to the website on Environment Canada and NRCan and taking a look at that. There'll be a lot of details there. Any suggestions or recommendations that any of the stakeholders wish to make, you know what, Todd, they're more than happy to email my office, and I'm more than happy to pass that on to the minister's office with details of ideas, because this is what it's about. This isn't about government just saying this is A, B, and C. This is about industry, the private sector, really being the technological leaders on this. Yes, we're going to increase the price on carbon. Yes, we're going to increase the price on pollution. Absolutely. We're going to, you know, we want to hit those goals. We're going to invest a lot of funds in a lot of different projects to help us get there, but we need industry support. And that question that came in on carbon sequestration, yes, you know, we need that support and those ideas coming from stakeholders.
Yeah, like you said, there's a lot of change and ideas out there that we don't all even know about yet, right? So it's great to hear that it's a two-way dialogue to be able to bring those forward and bring some to fruition. So
yes,
and
I actually just wanted to. Oh. I just wanted to mention for the for if people, folks listening and watching from our wonderful cities that make up all the regions here, is that the $950 million that was allocated in 2019, budget 2019, to FCM and the Green Municipal Fund, you know, to support energy efficiency and affordable social and market housing units, as well as large community buildings. So 2 of those 3 funding streams were launched in 2020. The third is expected to be launched in the spring of 2021. So I would very much, you know, I always say to the folks over at the City of Vaughan that we work closely with, there are a number of programs put in place, and there are folks that pay attention to that. Another one will be coming out the spring of 2021. And please watch for details about the 1.5 billion over 3 years to retrofit green, to make community building green and inclusive. repairs, upgrades, new builds, and retrofits, because there's going to be a bunch of funds for there that we can modernize buildings and make them net zero and eliminate the GHGs, as I like to call it.
Excellent. Okay, so the next question we've got is actually related to the rent benefit. So the question is, why did federal government set such a high threshold of revenue loss to claim the rent benefit? How about businesses who lost revenue in the 20 to 60% range?
The first thing I'm very, very happy to report that the rent benefit, the new rent benefit, the way it was designed, it is based on a sliding scale. So it's not binary. The last one was binary in terms of whether you qualified for it or not. And the prior one was based on cooperation from the landlord. So we've eliminated two very big obstacles that were there in the initial program. No, you don't need to, you can apply without the landlord's cooperation, and the funds are directly sent to the renter. And secondly, there is based on a sliding scale. The base subsidy rate, I believe, is 65%. And then areas that are in a lockdown, so for example, York Region's in a lockdown, if there's an event center that can operate, you're then entitled to 90% of that period's operating expenses relating to rent. I think up to the maximum of $75,000. So I would say one thing that we've done very, very well, not only rolling out the programs very quickly, like the Canada Emergency Response Benefit, now the Canada Recovery Benefit, but on the rental program, rent and rental contracts are covered by the provinces. The jurisdiction is actually the provincial jurisdiction. So for the federal government, we know how important it is to cooperate with our provincial partners, but we also know how important it is that when it's not federal jurisdiction, that we have to be very careful in terms of how we structure things. What we decided to do was, on the revised rental program, is we heard very loud and clearly we needed to take this benefit directly to renters, and we needed to make it based on a sliding scale. So if you were down 50%, or 60% or 30%, you would receive a certain amount of funding. And that's what we've done. And I'm very, very happy to report that. It's very easy to do. As the Parliamentary Secretary, the Revenue Minister, CRA is handling this program. It's handling the queues, it's handling the Canada Recovery Benefit. And I know how well our systems have been working. And those funds, Todd, are literally delivered. I would say, you know, if you have a My Business account, 3 to 5 business days, you get the funds after you've made that application.
Very good. I see the link has also been put up in the chat to the program, so that's available for anybody who's looking for more details. The next question talks about, kind of comes back to what we were talking to a little bit earlier with the supply chain, and they're asking or states there's a lot of talk about the rise in protectionism and nationalism, which could be reinforced by COVID-19 as a result of international supply chain issues. What do you believe is the future of globalization, outsourcing, and free trade in a post-COVID world?
I actually think the future is pretty bright, very, very bright actually. Canada does well when with multilateral institutions, and in the first session of Parliament, you know, we completed the Canada-European Free Trade Agreement, CETA, which the Conservatives had started, and then we finished. We revised the CPTPP, the partnership and the trade agreement with our Asian, number of Asian countries around the Pacific Rim. We went and completed with the Trump administration the new revised NAFTA. And those things are in place, like that is happening. And actually, if you look at the trade numbers around the world, and even here in Canada, to a large extent, I think we're up to like 96, 97%. We've actually recovered our trade volumes from pre-COVID. So if you look at the monthly international trade statistics out of Statistics Canada, which I will admit I do, we're actually recovering, and we've recovered over 95% of our trade volumes. So we're getting back up there. And with the newly elected, which will be sworn in January 20th, Biden administration, I think you'll see that also return to more multilateralism from the United States, and that's my opinion. But I believe it. So I think that bodes well for trade. We know, and countries know, that trade jobs that are based on trade, whether you're longshoring at a port, working for a railway, unloading containers, shipping products. Those jobs tend to pay higher than the average, tend to have great benefits, and so trade-related jobs are the jobs we want. And Canada is a trading country. Our economy depends on it, and we'll continue to do so. I actually think we are in a very good position with the world. We have agreements more than G7. We have agreements with all G7 countries for free trade, and those are going to remain in place. And I think multilateral institutions are going to play even a more important role. And if I can just pivot back to COVID-19, what you've seen in terms of how the world is reacting and how Europe, for example, they're getting their doses and dividing it up between their member states. Canada, we have a great portfolio, but we've done that in cooperation with a number of countries. Yes, there has been some nationalism. Of course, there always will be. But for the most part, you look at our large trading partners, and it's really been something that we can be proud of, to say that Canada has led the way in terms of promoting free trade, fair trade with our partners.
Yeah, just anecdotally, working at an airport, certainly seen the drop significant in passenger traffic, but cargo traffic is still there. It's I can certainly support that from what I see, on a day-to-day basis. The next question, is the federal government supporting provinces to provide energy efficiency retrofits or low carbon retrofits? And what form does that support take?
Within the provincial jurisdiction, the transition obviously has to be done in unison, but a number of these programs, so in terms of retrofits, a number of the programs will be, the application portal will open, and municipalities and provinces will be able to submit their proposals. So that's happening. For example, the 2.6 billion, which will be for individual households, so to retrofit your individual household, get an energy assessment, that'll be done directly from the federal government to the individual Canadian individual family. A number of other programs, traditionally the way they work is that there's a number of bilateral agreements that are in place, so it goes program by program. So in infrastructure, for example, a bilateral agreement comes in place, we provide the province a chunk of money. The province then selects the programs from the municipalities that it wishes to bring forward. The municipalities obviously have the choose what they wish to put forward, and that's traditionally how the programs have worked. And that's a number of them will work like that. Some of them won't. It just varies depending on program. We, for example, on the electric car rebate, we provide the $5,000 on our side. The provinces have that choice. BC does, Ontario doesn't. So there's obviously a level of decision making that takes place within the province with how they wish to participate in some of the programs.
Okay. The next question is related to financing again. So is your government open to working with the Canadian Infrastructure Bank in particular to provide low-cost financing for home energy retrofits?
That's actually a great question. As of now, the announcements coming out of the Canada Infrastructure Bank, and I actually have those written down, are to be blunt, going to be transformational in terms of speeding up a number of investments that here we go, a number of investments that we are going to make to, first of all, I just want to make sure I have the right data. The Canada Infrastructure Bank, 1.6 billion. No, here, just make sure I have the right. Excuse me 1 second, Todd. Just want to make sure I have the right data in front of me.
No worries.
Oh, okay. So the announcement that was made out of the Canada Infrastructure Bank was going to be very, very important in terms of its big picture. 2.5 billion to support renewable generation and storage between provinces and territories, regions. $2 billion for broadband. $2 billion to invest in large-scale building retrofits. 1.5 billion for agriculture irrigation projects, and 1.5 billion again to accelerate the adoption of zero-emission buses. As of today, I don't know what the CIB will do going forward. Obviously, I'm not privy to that in terms of its financing. I do know within the 64 measures that there will be funds utilized for retrofitting programs to help Canadians do that. I'll follow up on that, but my understanding that is the CIB's growth plan as of today.
Okay. The next question, interesting one as well. What industry sectors do you think have good potential for growth in the transition to a green economy in the GTA specifically?
What industry? Toronto has become sort of a hub for fintech and for the announcement from SAP, from Amazon, from Google on the technology side. A lot of small companies that are growing. So I think that sector there has been, I believe from the numbers that we created more tech jobs here in Toronto over the last several years, in the GTA, I would say, over the last several years. Than did Palo Alto, for example. I think that's the way the terms they define it. Toronto's become a very big hub in terms of that. Vancouver the same way. You've had a number of big announcements. I believe you just had some leasing activity in downtown Toronto that was announced last week by some of the tech firms. Autonomous vehicles. General Motors in Markham, under their leadership, is employing hundreds of engineers on autonomous vehicles, new technologies, looking at engineering on the electrical vehicle side. So there are a number of sectors there. I also think the move to online and digital is you're beginning to see that. So companies that provide those type of services on the reducing GHGs and like that, looking at working with supply chain. So building materials. There's a measure in the Healthy Environment, Healthy Economy book that has looking at the supply chain on building materials and looking at cement, looking at how you define how you build a regular home. Now, in Canada, you can build 6, 7, 8-story towers made out of wood. So looking at that opportunity there. So there are, I would say, a plethora of opportunities in terms of in the economy here in the GTA. We have a very vibrant economy, a lot of entrepreneurs, a lot of sectors, and we're home to a lot of clusters as well, like the food manufacturing sector. Very big. People don't think about it. It's huge. It's like the biggest employer in all of Ontario, agri-food and the whole continuum. So a lot of opportunities there. Packaging, reducing plastic use. So for those companies innovating, those companies that have ideas, I think it's going to be a very exciting time.
Excellent. That's basically all the questions that we have at this point. Mr. Sorbara, is there anything that we haven't talked about or that you'd like to expand on? Anything else you'd like to share?
I think we know. First, I thank everyone for the questions and for hearing me out over this last hour or so. As someone that is now in his second term in Parliament and someone who's lived abroad and lived in the United States for several years and worked abroad, and looking around in terms of what is going on in this world, and I was first introduced to Partners in Project Green. 2015 early, and I still have I was reading all the documents. The world is changing and there's a transition going on, and COVID-19 has sped a lot of those transitions, like the amount of online e-commerce that people are doing from their homes. 30, 35, 40% of all sales by some measurements. I get the MasterCard measurements every month and in a document. Just how much that's sped up. So the amount of time we spend on Zoom now and other platforms, and the GoTo webinar platform, or what we use in Parliament, that transition is happening very quickly. The number of vehicles we're going to see for electric vehicles over the next coming years, the investments that will be made to greening our economy, and I say that as a private sector person. I say that, like, look at the companies in the world that investors are rewarding, are companies on that realm, and the digitalization, green technology. Those are the companies that are being rewarded right now, and those are the companies in the future that will be rewarded even more so. So I hate using cliches, Todd. I hate saying where the puck is going, because you know what? There's only a couple Gretzkys and Lemieux out there in the world, but I always say look at where the conversation is going. and that's really important. Look at where the conversation is going, because that's important. And I think also, in terms of our government's our fiscal policy, we're going to continue to have the backs of Canadian workers and businesses. We don't want to have we don't want to have scarring. We want a majority, like as many businesses, to come out of this as possible. Yes, unfortunately, and I empathize with small business owners that unfortunately have had to close, but we want people to come out of this so we rebound and recover quicker. And that's what we've seen in our labor market, and some of the statistics. We're rebounding faster than other countries, and I think that's part and parcel because of a number of the measures that we put in place. And I think that's the very exciting opportunity for Canadians and as we move forward. But I think a lot of things are happening already, including this conversation here, where we didn't have to rent a hall, we didn't have to invite people to come. They could just participate from their home office, their workstation, on the road if they wanted to, which I don't encourage, of course, and utilize their time in the most productive manner possible.
Absolutely. I think back, 20 years ago, if we would have had, a pandemic, or, think back to the downturns in the economy, environment was one of the first things to be forgotten or dropped, right? And now it's recognized as an important part of the recovery. And the technology that we've got now to be able to adapt, and the way it's been adopted has just been fantastic. Like you say, I think this has been a very effective way to have this conversation. Would have liked a real fire for the fireside, but we'll settle with the glow of our computer screens. And thank you very much for your time and participation. This was great. A lot of information. I'm certainly going to go back to some of those links and go into more detail myself. You've sparked a lot of ideas for how we might look to participate in the programs at Toronto Pearson, and even potentially some of the home programs. So thank you very much. This was very informative, and I'd like to thank everybody for dialing in for this. As I mentioned at the start, this is recorded, so feel free to share this session with folks. And I'd like to wish everybody very safe and happy holiday season, and look forward to continuing these conversations into the new year.
Merry Christmas to everyone, and happy holidays, and all the best for the new year.
Happy holidays. Thank you.